Welcome to the series where I try to read every book in Skyrim. This series is made up of edited VODs from my Twitch channel where I've been streaming my attempts to read every book in Skyrim. As such, there may be a few errors sprinkled in here and there. My apologies for those errors, and I hope that you enjoy regardless. Thank you. But yeah, next up is 2920 Sun's Height, Volume 7. Sun's Height, Book 7 of 2920, The Last Year of the First Era, by Karlovac Townway. 4th of Sun's Height, 2920, the Imperial City, Cyrodiil. The Emperor Riemann III and his potentate Frostfall took a stroll around the Imperial Gardens. Studded with statuary and fountains, the North Gardens fit the Emperor's mood, as well as being the coolest acreage in the city during the heat of summertide. Austere, tiered flower beds of blue, gray, and green towered all around them as they walked. Vivek has agreed to the prince's terms for peace, said Riemann. My son will be returning in 2 weeks' time. This is excellent news, said the potentate carefully. I hope the Dunmer will honor the terms. We might have asked for more. The fortress at Blackgate, for example. But I suppose the prince knows what is reasonable. He would not cripple the empire just for peace. I have been thinking lately of Rija and what caused her to plot against my life, said the emperor, pausing to admire a statue of the slave queen Alicia before continuing. The only thing I can think of to account for it is that she admired my son too much. She may have loved me for my power and my personality, but he, after all, is young and handsome and will one day inherit my throne. She must have thought that if I were dead, she could have an emperor who had both youth and power. The prince was in on this plot, asked Frostfall. It was a difficult game to play, anticipating where the emperor's paranoia would strike next. Oh, I don't think so, said Riemann, smiling. No, my son loves me well. Are you aware that Corda, Rija's sister, is an initiate of the Morwa Conservatorium in Hegath? Asked Potentate. Morwa, asked the emperor. I've forgotten, which god is that? Lusty fertility goddesses of the Yokudans, replied the potentate, but not too lusty like Debella. Demure, but certainly sexual. I'm through with lusty women. The Empress, Rija, all too lusty. A lust for love leads to a lust for power. The emperor shrugged his shoulders. But a priestess in training with a certain healthy appetite sounds ideal. Now what were you saying about the Black Gate? 6 Sun's Height, 2920, the Rizzo Fortress, Cyrodiil. Rija stood quietly looking at the cold stone floor while the emperor spoke. He had never before seen her so pale and joyless. She might at least be pleased that she was being freed, being returned to her homeland. Why, if she left now, she could be in Hammerfell by the Merchants' Festival. Nothing he said seemed to register any reaction from her. A month-and-a-half stay in Thurzo Fortress seemed to have killed her spirit. I was thinking, said the emperor at last, of having your younger sister Corda up to the palace for a time. I think she would prefer it over the conservatorium in Hegath, don't you? Reaction at last. Rija looked at the emperor with animal hatred, flinging herself at him in a rage. The fingernails had grown long since her imprisonment, and she raked them across his face into his eyes. He howled with pain, and his guards pulled her off, pummeling her with blows from the back of their swords until she was knocked unconscious. A healer was called at once, but the Emperor Riemann III had lost his right eye. 23rd of Sun's Height, 2920, Balmora, Morrowind. Vivek pulled himself from the water, feeling the heat of the day washed from his skin, taking a towel from one of his servants. Sothasil watched his old friend from the balcony. Looks like you've picked up a few more scars since last I saw you, said the sorcerer. Azura granted that I have known more for a while, laughed Vivek. When did you arrive? A little over an hour ago, said Sothasil, walking down the stairs to the water's edge. I thought I was coming to end a war, but it seems you've done it without me. Yes, 80 years is long enough for ceaseless battle, replied Vivek, embracing Sothasil. We made concessions, but so did they. When the old emperor is dead, we may be entering a golden age. Prince Julek is very wise for his age. Where is Almalexia? Collecting the Duke of Mournhold. They should be here tomorrow afternoon. The men were distracted at a sight from around the corner of the palace. A rider was approaching through the town, heading for the front steps. It was evident that the woman had been riding hard for some time. They met her in the study, where she burst in breathing hard. We have been betrayed, she gasped. The Imperial Army has seized the Black Gate. 24 Sun's Height 2920, Balmora, Morrowind. It was the first time in 17 years that the 3 members of the Morrowind Tribunal had met in the same place since Sothasil had left for Artaeum. All 3 wished that the circumstances of the reunion were different. From what we have learned, while the prince was returning to Cyrodiil to the south, a second Imperial army came down from the north, said Vivek to his stony-faced compatriots. It is reasonable to assume Julik didn't know about the attack, but neither would it be unreasonable to suppose that he planned on being a distraction while the Emperor launched the attack on Black Gate, said Sothasil. This must be considered a break of the truce. Where is the Duke of Mournhold? Asked Vivek. I would hear his thoughts on the matter. He is meeting with the Night Mother in Telerin, said Almalexia quietly. I told him to wait until he had spoken with you, but he said that the matter had waited long enough. He would have involved the Morag Tong in outside affairs? Vivek shook his head and looked at Sothasil. Please, do what you can. Assassination will only move us backwards. This matter must be settled with diplomacy or battle. 25th of Sun's Height 2920, Tel Arin, Morrowind. The Night Mother met Sothasil in her salon, lit only by the moon. She was cruelly beautiful, dressed in a simple silk black robe, lounging across her divan. With a gesture, she dismissed her red-cloaked guards and offered the sorcerer some wine. You've only just missed your friend the Duke, she whispered. He was very unhappy, but I think we will solve his problem for him. Did he hire the Morag Tong to assassinate the Emperor? Asked Sothasil. You are very straightforward, aren't you? That's good. I love plain-speaking men. It saves so much time. Of course, I cannot discuss with you what the Duke and I talked about, she smiled. It would be bad for business. What if I were to offer you an equal amount of gold for you not to assassinate the Emperor? The Morag Tong murders for the glory of Mathala and for profit, she said, speaking into her glass of wine. We do not merely kill. That would be sacrilege. Once the Duke's gold has arrived in 3 days' time, we will do our end of the business. And I'm afraid we would not dream of entertaining a counter-offer. Though we are a business as well as a religious order, we do not bow to supply and demand, Sothasil. 27 Sun's Height, 2920, the Inner Sea, Morrowind. Sothasil had been watching the waters for 2 days now, waiting for a particular vessel, and now he saw it. A heavy ship with the flag of Mournhold. The sorcerer took the air and intercepted it before reaching harbor. A call of flame erupted over his figure, disguising his voice and form into that of a Daedra. Abandon your ship, he bellowed, if you would not sink with it. In truth, Sothasil could have exploded the vessel with but a single ball of fire, but he chose to take his time to give the crew a chance to dive off into warm water. When he was certain there was no one living aboard, he focused his energy into a destructive wave that shook the air and water as it discharged. The ship and the Duke's payment to the Morag Tong sunk into the bottom of the Inner Sea. Night Mother, thought Sothasil as he floated towards the shore to alert the harbour master that some sailors were in need of rescue. Everyone bows to supply and demand. The years continued in Last Seed. Next up is 2920, Last Seed, Volume 8. Last Seed, Book 8 of 2920, The Last Year of the First Era, by Karlovac Townway. First of Last Seed, 2920, Mournhold, Morrowind. They were gathered in the Duke's courtyard at twilight, enjoying the smell and warmth of a fire of dry branches and bitter green leaves. Tiny embers flew into the sky, hanging for a few moments before vanishing. I was rash, agreed the Duke soberly, but Lorcan had his laugh, and all is well. The Morag Tong will not assassinate the Emperor now that my payment to them is at the bottom of the Inner Sea. I thought you had made some sort of truce with the Daedra princess. What your sailors called a Daedra may not have been one, said Sothasil. Perhaps it was a rogue battle mage or even a lightning bolt that destroyed your ship. The prince and the Emperor are en route to take possession of the Adlambasi, as our truce agreed. It is certainly typical of Cyrodiil to assume that their concessions are negotiable, while ours are not. Vivek pulled out a map. We can meet them here in this village to the northwest of Aldlambacy, Ferventhill. Will we meet them to talk, asked Amalexia, or to make war? No one had an answer to that. 15 Last Sea 2920, Ferventhill, Morrowind. A late summer squall blew through the small village, darkening the sky except for flashing of lightning, which leapt from cloud to cloud like acrobats. Water rushed down the narrow streets, ankle deep, and the prince had to shout to be heard by his captain but a few feet away from him. There's an inn up ahead. We'll wait there for the storm to pass before pressing on to Aldlambacy. The inn was warm and dry and bustling with business. Barmaids were rushing back and forth, bringing grief and wine to a back room, evidently excited about a famous visitor. Someone who was attracting more attention than the mere heir to the Empire of Tamriel. Amused, Juilek watched them run until he overheard the name of Vivek. My lord Vivek, he said, bursting into the back room. You must believe me, I knew nothing about the attack on Blackgate until after it happened. We will, of course, be returning it to your care forthwith. I wrote you a letter to that effect at your palace in Balmora, but obviously you're not there. He paused, taking in the many new faces in the room. I'm sorry, let me introduce myself. I am Juilek Cyrodiil. My name is Almalexia, said the most beautiful woman the prince had ever seen. Won't you join us? Sothasil, said a serious-looking Dunmer in a white cloak, shaking the prince's hand and showing him to a seat. Indoril Brindisi Doram, Duke Prince of Mournhold, said the massively built man next to him as he sat down. I recognize that the events of the last month suggest, at best, that the Imperial army is not under my control, said the prince, after ordering some wine. This is true. The army is my father's. I understood that the Emperor was going to be coming to Aldlambacy as well, said Almalexia. Officially he is, said the prince cautiously. Unofficially, he's still back in the Imperial City. He's met with an unfortunate accident. Vivek glanced at the Duke quickly before looking at the prince. An accident? He's fine, said the prince quickly. He'll live, but it looks like he'll lose an eye. It was an altercation that has nothing to do with the war. The only good news is that while he recovers, I have the use of his seal. Any agreement we make here and now will be binding to the Empire, both in my father's reign and in mine. Then let's start agreeing, smiled Amalexia. 16th of Last Seed, 2920, Rothnagha, Cyrodiil. The tiny hamlet of Rothnagha greeted Cassir with its colorful houses perched on a promontory overlooking the stretch of the Rothgarian mountain plain. Of the Rothgarian mountain plain and high rock beyond. Had he been in a better mood, the sight would have been breathtaking. As it was, he could only think that in practical terms, a small village like this would have meager provisions for himself and his horse. He rode down into the main square where an inn called the Eagle's Cry stood. Directing the stable boy to house and feed his horse, Cassir walked into the inn and was surprised by its ambiance. A minstrel he had heard play once in Gilderdale was performing a jaunty old tune to the clapping of the mountain men. Such forced merriment was not what Cassir wanted at that moment. A glum Dunmer woman was seated at the only table far from the noise, so he took his drink there and sat down without invitation. It was only when he did so that he noticed that she was holding a newborn baby. I've just come from Morrowind, he said rather awkwardly, lowering his voice. I've been fighting for Vivek and the Duke of Mournhold against the Imperial army. A traitor to my people, I guess you'd call me. I am also a traitor to my people, said the woman, holding up her hand, which was scarred with a branded symbol. It means that I can never go back to my homeland. Well, you're not thinking of staying here, are you? Laughed Cassir. It's certainly quaint, but come wintertide, there's going to be snow up to your eyelashes. It's no place for a new baby. What is her name? Basriel. It means beauty of the forest. Where are you going? Dwynnen, on the bay in High Rock. You're welcome to join me. I could use the company. He held out his hand, Cassir Whitley. Tarala, said the woman after a pause. She was going to use her family's name first, as is tradition, but she realized that it was no longer her name. I would love to accompany you, thank you. 19th of Last Sea, 2920, Aldlambacy, Morrowind. 5 men and 2 women stood in the silence of the great room of the castle, the only sound the scrawl of quill on parchment and the gentle tapping of rain on the large picture window. As the prince set the seal of Cyrodiil on the document, the peace was made official. The Duke of Mournhold broke out in a roar of delight, ordering wine brought in to commemorate the end of 80 years of war. Only Sothasil stood apart from the group. His face betrayed no emotion. Those who knew him best knew he did not believe in endings or beginnings, but in the continuous cycle of which this was but a small part. "My prince," said the castle steward, unhappy at breaking the celebration. "There's a messenger here from your mother, the Empress. He asked to see your father, but as he did not arrive." Dulik excused himself and went to speak with the messenger. "The Empress does not live in the Imperial City?" asked Vivek. "No," said Almalexia, shaking her head sadly. "Her husband has imprisoned her in Black Marsh, fearing that she was plotting revolution against him. She is extremely wealthy and has powerful allies in the western Nicolovian estates, so he could not marry another or have her executed. They've been at an impasse for the last 17 years since Julak was a child." The prince returned a few minutes later. His face betrayed his anxiety, though he took troubles to hide it. "My mother needs me," he said simply. "I'm afraid I must leave at once. If I may have a copy of the treaty, I will bring it with me to show the Empress the good we have done today, and then I will carry it on to the Imperial City, so it may be made official." Prince Julak left with the fond farewells of the three of Morrowind. As they watched him ride out into the rain-swept night south towards Black Marsh, Vivek said, "Tamriel will be much healed when he has the throne." 31st of last sea, 2920. Dorsha Pass, Black Marsh. The moon was rising over the desolate quarry, steaming with swamp gas from a particularly hot summer as the prince and his two-guard escort rode out of the forest. The massive piles of earth and dung had been piled high in antiquity by some primitive, long-dead tribe of Black Marsh, hoping to keep out some evil from the north. Evidently, the evil had broken through at Dorsha Pass, the large crack in the sad, lonely rampart that stretched for miles. The black, twisted trees that grew on the barrier cast strange shadows down like a net tangling. The prince's mind was on his mother's cryptic letter, hinting at the threat of an invasion. He could not, of course, tell the Dunmer about it, at the very least until he knew more and had notified his father. After all, the letter was meant for him. It was its urgent tone that made him decide to go directly to Gideon. The Empress had also warned him about a band of former slaves who attacked caravans going to Dorsha Pass. She advised him to be certain to make his imperial shield visible so they would know he was not one of the hated Dunmer slavers. Upon riding into the tall weeds that flooded through the pass like a noxious river, the prince ordered that his shield be displayed. Oh shit! Oh shit! It was meant for his father! And the guy who's supposed to be assassinating was like, make sure the Emperor is clearly marked because I'm not going to be attacking any caravan. Oh shit. It was meant for his father, not for the prince. Oh. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Ooh, I don't like that. "I can see why the slaves used this," said the prince's captain. "It's an excellent location for an ambush." Julek nodded his head, but his thoughts were elsewhere. What threat of invasion could the Empress have discovered? Where was Akaviri on the seas again? If so, were the Akaviri on the seas again? If so, how could his mother from her cell in Castle Giovese know of it? A rustle in the weeds and a single sharp human cry behind him interrupted his ponderings. Turning around, the prince discovered that he was alone. His escort had vanished. The prince peered over the stretch of the moonlit sea of grass, which waved in almost hypnotic patterns to the ebb and flow of the night wind, billowing through the pass. It was impossible to tell if a struggling soldier was beneath this system of vibrations, a dying horse behind another. A high, whistling wind drowned out any sound the victims of the ambush might be making. Julek drew his sword and thought about what to do, his mind willing his heart not to panic. He was closer to the exit of the pass than the entrance. Whatever had slain his escort must have been behind him. If he rode fast enough, perhaps he could outrun it. Spurring his horse to gallop, he charged for the hills ahead, framed by the mighty black piles of dirt. When he was thrown, it happened so suddenly. He was hurtling forward before he was truly conscious of the fact. He landed several yards beyond where his horse had fallen, breaking his shoulder and his back on impact. A numbness washed over him as he stared at his poor dying steed, its belly sliced open by one of several spears jutting up just below the surface of the grass. Prince Julek was not able to turn and face the figure that emerged from the grass, nor able to move to defend himself. His throat was cut without ceremony. Miramor cursed when he saw the face of his victim more clearly in the moonlight. He had seen the Emperor at the Battle of Bodrum when he had fought in his Imperial Majesty's command, and this was clearly not the Emperor. Searching the body, he found the letter and a treaty signed by Vivek Almalexia, Sothasil, and the Duke of Mornholt, representing Morrowind, and the Prince Julek of Cyrodiil, representing the Cyrodiil Empire. "Curse my luck," muttered Miramor to himself in the whispering grass. "I've only killed a prince. Where's the reward in that?" Miramor destroyed the letter, as Zook had instructed him to do, and pocketed the treaty. At the very least, such a curiosity would have some market value. He disassembled the traps as he pondered his next step. Return to Gideon and ask his employer for a lesser reward for killing the heir? Move on to other lands? At the very least, he considered he had picked up 2 useful skills from the Battle of Bodrum. From the Dunmer, he had learned the excellent spear trap, and abandoning the Imperial army, he had learned how to skulk in the grass. The years continued in Hearth Fire. 2920 Hearth Fire, Volume 9. Hearth Fire, Book 9 of 2920. The Last Year of the First Era, by Karlovac Townway. 2nd of Hearth Fire, 2920, Gideon Blackmarsh. The Empress Tavia lay across her bed, a hot late summer wind she could not feel banging the shutters. A hot late summer wind she could not feel banging the shutters of her cell to and fro against the iron bars. Her throat felt like it was on fire, but still she sobbed uncontrollably, wringing her last tapestry in her hands. Her wailing echoed throughout the hollow halls of Castle Gioves, stopping maids in their washing and guards in their conversation. One of her women came up the narrow stairs to see her mistress, but her chief guard, Zook, stood at the doorway and shook his head. "She's just heard that her son is dead," he said quietly. 5th of Hearth Fire, 2920, the Imperial City of Cyrodiil. "Your Imperial Majesty," said the potentate Versidou Shai through the door. "You can open the door. I assure you you're perfectly safe. No one wants to kill you." "Mara's blood," came the Emperor Raymond III's voice, muffled, hysterical, tinged with madness. "Someone assassinated the prince, and he was holding my shield. They could have thought he was me." "You're certainly correct, Your Imperial Majesty," replied the potentate, expunging any mocking qualities from his voice while his black-slitted eyes rolled contemptuously. "And we must find and punish the evildoer responsible for your son's death. But we cannot do it without you. You must be brave for your empire." There was no reply. "At the very least, come out and sign the order for Lady Recha's execution," called the potentate. "Let us dispose of the one traitor and assassin we know of." A brief pause, and then the sound of furniture scraping across the floor. Riemann opened the door just a crack, but the potentate could see his angry, fearful face and the terrible mound of ripped tissue that used to be his right eye. Despite the best healers in the Empire, it was still a ghastly souvenir of the Lady Recha's work in Thurzo Fortress. "Hand me the order," the Emperor snarled. "I'll sign it with pleasure." 6 Hearth Fire, 2920, Gideon, Cyrodiil. The strange blue glow of the will-o'-the-wisps, a combination, so she'd been told, of swamp gas and spiritual energy, had always frightened Tavia as she looked out her window. Now it seemed strangely comforting. Beyond the bog lay the city of Gideon. It was funny, she thought, that she had never stepped foot in its streets, though she had watched it every day for 17 years. "Can you think of anything I've forgotten?" She asked, turning to look back on the loyal Kathringi Zook. "I know exactly what to do," he said simply. He seemed to smile, but the Empress realized that it was only her own face reflected in his silvery skin. She was smiling, and she didn't even realize it. "Make certain you aren't followed," she warned. "I don't want my husband to know where my gold's been hiding all these years. And do take your share of it. You've been a good friend." The Empress Tavia stepped forward and dropped from sight into the mists. Zook replaced the bars on the tower window and threw a blanket over some pillows on her bed. With any luck, they would not discover her body on the lawn until morning, at which time he hoped to be halfway to Morrowind. 9 of Hearth Fire, 2920, Phrygius High Rock. The strange trees on all sides resembled knobby piles crowned with great bursts of red, yellows, and oranges, like insect mounds caught fire. The Rothgarian mountains were fading into the misty afternoon. Turala marveled at the sight, so alien, so different from Morrowind, as she plodded the horse forward into an open pasture. Behind her, head nodding against his chest, Kassir slept, cradling Bosriel. For a moment, Turala considered jumping the low-painted fence that crossed the field, but she thought better of it. Let Kassir sleep for a few more hours before giving him the reins. As the horse passed into the field, Turala saw the small green house on the next hill, half hidden in the forest. So picturesque was the image she felt herself lull into a pleasant half-sleeping state. A blast of a horn brought her back to reality with a shudder. Kassir opened his eyes. "Where are we?" he hissed. "I don't know," Turala stammered, eyes wide-eyed. "What is that sound?" "Orcs," he whispered, "a hunting party. Head for the thicket, quickly." Turala trotted the horse into the small collection of trees. Kassir handed her the child and dismounted. They began pulling their bags off necks, throwing them into the bushes. A sound started then, a distant rumbling footfall, growing louder and closer. Turala climbed off carefully and helped Kassir unburden the horse. All the while, Bosriel watched open-eyed. Turala sometimes worried that her baby never cried. Now she was grateful for it. With the last of the luggage off, Kassir slapped the horse's rear, sending it galloping into the field. Taking Turala's hand, he hunkered down in the bushes. "With luck," he murmured, "they'll think she's wild or belongs to the farm, and won't go looking for the rider." As he spoke, a horde of orcs surged into the field, blasting their horns. Turala had seen orcs before, but never in such abundance, never with such bestial confidence. Roaring with delight at the horse and its confused state, they hastened past the timber where Kassir, Turala, and Bosriel hid. The wildflowers flew into the air at their stampede, powdering the air with seeds. Turala tried to hold back a sneeze and thought she succeeded. One of the orcs heard something, though, and brought another with him to investigate. Kassir quietly unsheathed his sword, mustering all the confidence he could. His skills, such as they were in spying, not in combat, but he vowed to protect Turala and her babe for as long as he could. Perhaps he would slay these two, he reasoned, but not before they cried out and brought the rest to the horde. Suddenly, something invisible swept through the bushes like a wind. The orcs flew backwards, falling dead on their backs. Turala turned and saw a wrinkled crone with bright red hair emerge from a nearby bush. "I thought you were going to bring them right to me," she whispered, smiling. "Best come with me." The three followed the old woman through a deep crevasse of bramble bushes that ran through the field toward the house on the hill. As they emerged on the other side, the woman turned to look at the orcs feasting on the remains of the horse, a blood-soaked orgy to the beat of multiple horns. "That horse yours?" she asked. When Kassir nodded, she laughed loudly. "That's Schmidt, that is. Those monsters will have bellyaches and flatulence in the morning. Serves them right." "Shouldn't we keep moving?" whispered Turala, unnerved by the woman's laughter. "They won't come up here," she grinned, looking at Bosriel, who smiled back. "They're too afraid of us." Turala turned to Kassir, who shook his head. "Witches. Am I correct in assuming that this is old Barbin's farm, the home of the Skeffington Coven?" "You are pets," the old woman giggled girlishly, pleased to be so infamous. "I am Minister Skeffington." "What did you do to those orcs?" asked Turala, back there in the thicket. "Spirit fist right side the head," Minister said, continuing to climb up the hill. Ahead of them was the farmhouse grounds, a well, a chicken coop, a pond, women of all ages doing chores, the laughter of children at play. The old woman turned and saw Turala did not understand. "Don't you have witches where you come from, child?" "None that I know of," she said. "There are all sorts of wielders of magic in Tamriel," she explained. "The Psijics study magic like it's their painful duty. The battle mages in the army on the other end of the scale hurl spells like arrows. We witches commune and conjure and celebrate. To fell those orcs, I merely whispered to the spirits of the air, Amaro, Hina, Talatha, the fingers of Kinnereth and the breath of the world, with whom I have an intimate acquaintance, to smack those bastards dead. You see, conjuration is not about might or solving riddles or agonizing over musty old scrolls. It's about fostering relations, being friendly, you might say." "Well, we certainly appreciate you being friendly with us," said Kassir. "As well you might," coughed Minister. "Your kind destroyed the orc homeland 2,000 years ago. Before that, they never came all the way up here and bothered us. Now, let's get you cleaned up and fed." With that, Minister led them into the farm, and Turala met the family of the Skeffington Coven. 11th of Hearth Fire, 2920. The Imperial City, Cyrodiil. Rita had not even tried to sleep the night before, and she found the somber music played during her execution to have a soporific effect. It was as if she was willing herself to be unconscious before the axe stroke. Her eyes were bound so she could not see her former lover, the Emperor, seated before her, glaring with his one good eye. She could not see the potentate Versidue, his coil neatly wrapped beneath him, a look of triumph on his golden face. She could feel numbly the executioner's hand touch her back to steady her. She flinched like a dreamer trying to awake. The first blow caught the back of her head and she screamed. The next hacked through her neck and she was dead. The Emperor turned to the potentate warily. Well, now that's done. You said she had a pretty sister in Hammerfell named Corda? 18th of Hearth Fire, 2920, Dwyn in High Rock. The horse the witches had sold him was not as good as its old one, Kasir considered. Spirit worship and sacrifice and sisterhood might be all well and good for conjuring spirits, but it tends to spoil beasts of burden. Still, there was little to complain about. With the Dunmer woman and her child gone, he had made excellent time. Ahead were the walls surrounding the city of his homeland. Almost at once he was set upon by his old friends and family. "How went the war?" cried his cousin, running to the road. "Is it true that Vivek signed a peace with the prince, but the Emperor refuses to honor it?" "That's not how it was it?" asked a friend, joining them. "I heard that the Dunmer had the prince murdered and then made up a story about a treaty, but there's no evidence for it." Isn't there anything interesting happening here?" Kasir laughed. "I really don't have the least interest in discussing the war or Vivek." You missed the procession of the Lady Corda," said his friend. "She came across the bay with full entourage and then east of the Imperial City." "That's nothing. What was Vivek like?" asked his cousin eagerly. "He's supposed to be a living god." "If Sheograth steps down and they need another god of madness, he'll do," said Kasir haughtily. "And the woman?" asked the lad, who had only seen Dunmer ladies on very rare occasions. Kasir merely smiled. Tralla Skeffington flashed into his mind for an instant before fading away. She would be happy with the coven, and her child would be well cared for. But they were part of the past now, a place and a war he wanted to forget forever. Dismounting his horse, he walked it into the city, chatting of trivial gossip of life on the Iliac Bay. What? No, continued in 2920 Frostfall Volume 10? Well, that was 2920 Hearth Fire Volume 9. Next up is Volume 10, Frostfall. Frostfall, Book 10 of 2920, The Last Year of the First Era, by Karlovac Dunway. 10th of Frostfall, 2920, Phrygius, High Rock. The creature before them blinked, senseless, its eyes glazed, mouth opening and closing as if relearning its function. A thin glob of saliva burbled down between its fangs and hung suspended. Tralla had never seen anything of its kind before, reptilian and massive, perched on its hind legs, like a man. Ministra applauded enthusiastically. "My child," she crowed, "you've come so far in so short a time. What were you thinking when you summoned this day drop?" It took Tralla a moment to recall whether she was thinking anything at all. She was merely overwhelmed that she had reached out across the fabric of reality into the realm of oblivion and plucked forth this loathsome creature, conjuring it into the world by the power of her mind. "I was thinking of the color red," Tralla said, concentrating, the simplicity and clarity of it. And then, "I desired and spoke the charm, and this is what I conjured up." "Desire is a powerful force for a young witch," said Ministra. "And it is well matched in this instance, for this Daedroth is nothing if not a simple force of the spirits. Can you release your desire as easily?" Tralla closed her eyes and spoke the dismissal invocation. The monster faded away like a painting in sunlight, still blinking confusedly. Ministra embraced her dark elf pupil, laughing with delight. "I never would have believed it. A month and a day you've been with the Coven, and you're already far more advanced than most of the women here. There is powerful blood in you, Tralla. You touch spirits like you were touching a lover. You'll be leading this coven one day. I have seen it." Tralla smiled. It was good to be complimented. The Duke of Mournhold had praised her pretty face, and her family, before she had dishonored them, praised her manners. Kasir had been nothing more than a companion. His compliments meant nothing. But with Ministra, she felt she was home. You'll be leading the coven for many years yet, great sister, said Tarala. I certainly intend to, but the spirits, while marvelous companions and faultless tellers of truth, are often hazy about the when and hows. You can't blame them, really. When and how means so little to them. Ministra opened the door to the shed, allowing the brisk autumn breeze in to dispel the bitter and fetid smells of the daydrop. Now, I need you to run an errand to Raywest. It's only a week's ride there, and a week's ride back. Bring Bring Duriatha and Selifna with you. As much as we try to be self-sufficient, there are herbs we can't grow here, and we seem to run through an enormous quantity of gems in no time at all. It's important that the people of the city learn to recognize you as one of the wise women of Skeffington Coven. You'll find the benefits of being notorious far outweigh the inconveniences. Tarala did as she was bade. As she and her sisters climbed aboard their horses, Ministra brought her child, little 5-month-old Bosriel, to kiss her mother goodbye. The witches were in love with the little Dunmer infant, fathered by a wicked duke, birthed by wild Aelid elves in the forest heart of the Empire. Tarala knew her nursemaids would protect her child with their lives. After many kisses and a farewell wave, the 3 young witches rode off into the bright woods, under a covering of red, yellow, and orange. 12th of Frostfall, 2920, Dwinin High Rock. For a mid-us evening, the least-loved Porcupine Tavern was wildly crowded. A roaring fire in the pit in the center of the room cast an almost sinister glow on all the regulars and made the abundance of bodies look like a punishment tapestry inspired by the Arcturian heresies. Kasir took his usual place with his cousin and ordered a flagon of ale. Have you been to see the Baron? Asked Palith. Yes, he may have work for me in the Palace of Ervius, said Kasir proudly. But more than that I can't say. You understand, secrets of state and all that. Why are there so many damn people here tonight? A shipload of dark elves just came into the harbor. They've come from the war. I was just waiting until you got here to introduce you to another veteran. Kasir blushed but regained his composure enough to ask, what are they doing here? Has there been a truce? I don't know the full story, said Palith, but apparently the Emperor and Vivek are in negotiations again. These fellas here have investments they were keen to check on, and they figured things on the bay were quiet enough. But the only way we can get the full story is to talk to the chaps. With that, Palith gripped his cousin's arm and pulled him to the other side of the bar so suddenly, Kasir would have had to struggle violently to resist. The Dunmer travelers were spread across 4 of the tables, laughing with the locals. They were largely amiable young men, well-dressed, befitting merchants, animated in gesture made more extravagant by liquor. Excuse me, said Palith, intruding on the conversation. My shy cousin Kasir was in the war as well, fighting for the living god Vivek. The only Kasir I ever heard of, said one of the Dunmer drunkenly, with a wide, friendly smile, shaking Kasir's free hand, was a Kasir Whitley, who Vivek said was the worst spy in history. We lost Aldmark due to his bungling intelligence work. For your sake, friend, I hope the 2 of you were never confused. Kasir smiled and listened as the lout told the story of his failure with bountiful exaggerations, which caused the table to roar with laughter. Several eyes looked his way, but none of the locals sought to explain that the fool of the tale was standing at attention. The eyes that stung the most were his cousin's, the young man who had believed that he had returned to Dwinin a great hero. At some point, certainly, the Baron would hear about it, his idiocy increasing manifold with each retelling. With every fiber in his soul, Kasir cursed the living god Vivek. 21st of Frostfall, 2920. The Imperial City, Cyrodiil. Corda, in a robe of blinding whiteness, a uniform of the priestesses of Higath Morwa Conservatorium, arrived in the city just as the first winter storm was passing. The clouds broke with sunlight, and the beauteous, teen-aged Redguard girl appeared in the wide avenue with escort, riding toward the palace. While her sister was tall, thin, angular, and haughty, Corda was a small, round-faced lass with wide brown eyes. The locals were quick to draw comparisons. Not a month after Lady Rege's execution, muttered a housemaid, peering out the window and winking to her neighbor. And not a month out of the nunnery either, the other woman agreed, reveling in the scandal. This one's in for a ride. Her sister weren't no innocent, and look where she ended up. 24th of Frostfall, 2920, Dwinin High Rock. Kasir stood on the harbor and watched the early sleet fall on the water. It was a pity, he thought, that he was prone to seasickness. There was nothing for him now in Tamriel to the east or to the west. The vexed tale of his poor spycraft had spread to taverns everywhere. The Baron of Dwinnen had released him from his contract. No doubt they were laughing about him in Daggerfall too, and Dawnstar and Lillimouth, Rimmon, Greenheart, probably in Akavir, and Yokuda for that matter. Perhaps it would be best to drop into the waves and sink. The thought, however, did not stay long in his mind. It was not despair that haunted him, but rage, impotent fury that he could not assuage. "Excuse me, sir," said a voice behind him, making him jump. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but I was wondering whether you could recommend an inexpensive tavern for me to spend the night." It was a young man, a Nord, with a sack over his shoulder. Obviously, he had just disembarked from one of the boats. For the first time in a week, someone was looking at Cassier as something other than a colossal, famous idiot. He could not help, black as his mood was, but be friendly. "You've just arrived from Skyrim?" asked Cassier. "No, sir, that's where I'm going," said the fellow. "I'm working my way home. I've come up from the Sentinel, and before that, Strass Mackay, and before that, Woodhearth and Valenwood, and before that, Artaeum and Somerset. Wellig's my name." Cassier introduced him and shook Wellig's hand. "Did you say you came from Artaeum? Are you a Sijic?" "No, sir, not anymore," the fellow shrugged. "I was expelled." "Do you know anything about summoning Daedra? You see, I want to cast a curse against a particularly powerful person. One might say a living god. And I haven't had any luck. The Baron won't allow me in his sight, but the Baroness has sympathy for me and allowed me the use of their summoning chambers." Cassier spat. "I did all the rituals, made sacrifices, but nothing came of it." "That'd be because Sothasil, my old master," replied Wellig with some bitterness. "The Daedra princes have agreed not to be summoned by any amateurs, at least until the war ends. Only the Sijics may counsel with the Daedra, and a few nomadic sorcerers and witches." "Witches, you say?" 29th of Frostfall, 2920, Phrygia's High Rock. Pale sunlight flickered behind the mist, bathing the forest as Turala, Duriatha, and Selifna drove their horses on. The ground was wet with a thin layer of frost, and laden down with goods. It was a slippery way over unpaved hills. Turala tried to contain her excitement about coming back to the Coven. The way Russ had been an adventure, and she adored the looks of fear and respect the city folk gave her. But for the last few days, all she could think of was returning to her sisters and her child. A bitter wind whipped her hair forward so she could see nothing but the path ahead. She did not hear the rider approach to her side until he was almost upon her. When she turned and saw Cassier, she shouted with as much surprise as pleasure at meeting an old friend. His face was pale and drawn, but she took it to be merely from travel. "What brings you back to Phrygia?" she smiled. "Were you not treated well in Dwinnen?" "Well enough," said Cassier. "I have need of the Skeffington Coven." "Ride with us," said Turala. "I'll bring you to Ministra." The four continued on, and the witches regaled Cassier with tales of Wayrest. It was evident that it was also a rare treat for Duriatha and Selifna to leave old Barbin's farm. They had been born there as daughters and granddaughters of Skeffington wishes. Ordinary High Rock city life was exotic to them as it was to Turala. Cassier said little, but smiled and nodded his head, which was encouragement enough. Thankfully, none of the stories they had heard were about his own stupidity, or at the very least they did not tell him. Duriatha was in the midst of a tale she had heard in a tavern about a thief who had been locked overnight in a pawnshop when they crossed over a familiar hill. Suddenly, she halted in her story. The barn was supposed to be visible, but it was not. The other three followed her gaze into the fog, and a moment later they rode as fast as they could towards what was once the site of the Skeffington Coven. The fire had long since burned out. Nothing but ashes, skeletons, and broken weaponry remained. Cassier recognized at once the signs of an orc raid. The witches fell from their horses, racing through the remains, wailing. Selifna found a tattered, bloody piece of a cloth that she recognized from Nistra's cloak. She held it to her ashen face, sobbing. Turala screamed for Bosriel, but the only reply was the high whistling wind through the ashes. "Who did this?" she cried, tears streaking down her face. "I swear I'll conjure up the very flames of oblivion. What have they done with my baby?" "I know who did it," said Cassier quietly, dropping from his horse and walking towards her. "I've seen these weapons before. I fear I met the very fiends responsible in Dwinnen, but I never thought they'd find you. This is the work of assassins, hired by the Duke of Mournhold." He paused. The lie came easily. Adopt and improvise. What's more, he could tell instantly that she believed it. Her resentment over the cruelty the Duke had shown her had quieted, but never disappeared. One look at her burning eyes told him that she would summon the Daedra and wreak his and her revenge upon Morrowind. And what's more, he knew they'd listen. And listen they did. For the power that is greater than desire is rage, even rage misplaced. Only 2 more books left. Sun's Dusk, Volume 11, and Evening Star, Volume 12, and then the 2920 series will be over. That was Frostfall, Volume 10. Next up is 2920, Sun's Dusk, Volume 11. Sun's Dusk, Book 11 of 2920, The Last Year of the First Era, by Karlovac Donway. Second of Sun's Dusk, 2920, Tel Arin Morrowind. A man to see you, Night Mother, said the guard. A Kothringi tribesman who presents his credentials as Lord Duke of Blackmarsh, part of the Imperial garrison of Gideon. What makes you think I'd have even the slightest possible interest in seeing him? Asked the Night Mother with venomous sweetness. He brings a letter from the late Empress of the Cyrodiilic Empire. We are having a busy day, she smiled, clapping her hands together with delight. Show him in. Zook entered the chamber, his metallic skin, though exposed only at his face and hands, caught the light of the fireplace and the lightning of the stormy night from the window. The Night Mother noted also that she could see herself as he saw her, serene, beautiful, fear-inspiring. He handed her his letter from the Empress without a word. Sipping her wine, she read it. The Duke of Morrowind also offered me an appreciable sum to have the Emperor murdered earlier this year, she said, folding the letter. His payment sunk and never was delivered. It was a considerable annoyance, particularly as I had already gone to the trouble of putting one of my agents in the palace. Why should I assume that your more than generous payment from a dead woman will arrive? I brought it with me, said Zook simply. It is in the carriage outside. Then bring it in, and our business is complete, smiled the Night Mother. The Emperor will be dead by year's end. You may leave the gold with Epauleteth, unless you care for some wine. Zook declined the offer and withdrew. The moment he left the room, Miramor slipped noiselessly back from behind its dark tapestry. The Night Mother offered him a glass of wine, and he accepted it. I know that fellow, Zook, said Miramor carefully. I didn't know he worked for the old Empress, though. Let's talk about you some more if you don't mind, she said, knowing he would. In fact, not mind. Let me show you my worth, said Miramor. Let me be the one to do the Emperor in. I've already killed his son, and you saw there how well I can hide myself away. Tell me you saw one ripple in the tapestry. The Night Mother smiled. Things were falling into place rather nicely. If you know how to use a dagger, you'll find him at Bodrum, she said, and described to him what he must do. Third of Sun's Dusk, 2920, Mournhold Morrowind. The Duke stared out the window. It was early morning, and for the 4th straight day, a red mist hung over the city, flashing lightning. A freakish wind blew through the streets, ripping his flags from the castle battlements, forcing all his people to close their shutters tightly. Something terrible was coming to this land. He was not a greatly learned man, but he knew the signs. So, too, did his subjects. When will my messengers reach the 3? He growled, turning to his Castellan. Vivek is far to the north, negotiating the treaty with the Emperor, the man said, his face and voice trembling with fear. Amalexia and Sotha still are in Necrom. Perhaps they can be reached in a few days' time? The Duke nodded. He knew his messengers were fast, but so too was the Hand of Oblivion. 6 of Sun's Dusk, 2920, Bodrum, Morrowind. Torchlight caught in the misting snow gave the place an otherworldly quality. The soldiers from both camps found themselves huddled together around the largest of the bonfires, winter bringing enemies of 80 of warring close together. While only a few of the Dunmer Guard could speak Cyrodiilic, they found common ground battling for warmth. When a pretty red guard maiden passed into their midst to warm herself before moving back to the treaty tent, many a man from both armies raised their eyes in approval. The Emperor Riemann III was eager to leave negotiations before they had ever begun. A month earlier, he thought it would be a sign of goodwill to meet at the site of his defeat to Vivek's army, But the place brought back more bad memories than he thought it would. Despite the protestations of Potentate Versidjushai that the rocks of the river were naturally red, he could swear he saw splatters of his soldiers' blood. "We have all the particulars of the treaty," he said, taking his glass of hot Uel from his mistress Corda. "But here and now is not the place for signing. We should do it at the Imperial Palace, with all the pomp and splendor this historic occasion demands. You must bring Almalexia with you as well. And that wizard fellow." "Sothasil," whispered the Potentate. "When?" asked Vivek with infinite patience. "In exactly a month's time," said the Emperor, smiling munificently and clambering awkwardly to his feet. "We will hold a grand ball to commemorate. Now I must take a walk. My legs are all cramped up with the weather. Corda, my dear, will you walk with me?" "Of course, Your Imperial Majesty," she said, helping him towards the tent's entrance. "Would you like me to come with you as well, Your Imperial Majesty?" asked Versidjushai. "Or I?" asked King Drizel of Senchal, a newly appointed advisor to the court. "That won't be necessary. I won't be gone a minute," said Riemann. Miramor crouched in the same rushes he had hidden in nearly 8 months before. Now the ground was hard and snow-covered, and the rushes slick with ice. Every slight movement he made issued forth a crunch. If it were not for the raucous songs of the combined Morrowind and Imperial army gathered around the bonfire, he would not have dared creep as close to the Emperor and his concubine. They were standing at the curve in the frozen creek below the bluff, surrounded by trees sparkling with ice. Carefully, Miramor removed the dagger from its sheath. He had slightly exaggerated his abilities with the short blades in the Night Mother. True, he had used one to cut the throat of Prince Duelek, but the lad was not in any position to fight back at the time. Still, how difficult could it be to stab an old man with one eye? What sort of blade skill would such an easy assassination require? His ideal moment presented itself before his eyes. The woman saw something deeper in the woods, an icicle of an unusual shape, she said, and darted off to get it. The Emperor remained behind, laughing. He turned to the face of the bluff to see his soldiers singing their song's refrain, his back to his assassin. Miramor knew the moment had come. Mindful of the sound of his footfall on the icy ground, he stepped forward and struck, very nearly. Almost simultaneously, he was aware of a strong arm holding back his striking arm and another one punching a dagger into his throat. He could not scream. The Emperor, still looking up at the soldiers, never saw Miramor pulled back into the brush, and a hand much more skilled than his slicing into his back, paralyzing him. His blood pooling out and already crystallizing on the frozen ground, Miramor watched, dying, as the Emperor and his courtesan returned to join the camp up on the bluff. 12 of Sun's Dusk, 2920, Mournhold Morrowind. A gout of ever-erupting flame was all that remained of the central courtyard of Castle Mournhold, blasting skyward into the boiling clouds. A thick, tarry smoke rolled through the streets, igniting everything that was wood or paper on fire. Winged, bat-like creatures harried the citizens from their hiding places out into the open, where they were met by the real army. The only thing that kept all of Mournhold from burning to the ground was the wet, sputtering blood of its people. Mehrunes Dagon smiled as he surveyed the castle crumbling. "To think I nearly didn't come," he said out loud, his voice booming over the chaos. "Imagine missing all this fun." His attention was arrested by a needle-thin shaft of light piercing through his black and red-shadowed sky. He followed it to its source, 2 figures, a man and a woman, standing on the hill above town. The man in the white robe he recognized immediately as Sothasil, the sorcerer who had talked all the princes of Oblivion into that meaningless truce. "If you've come for the Duke of Mournhold, he isn't here," laughed Mehrunes Dagon. "But you might find pieces of him the next time it rains." "Daedra." "We cannot kill you," said Almalexia, her face hard and resolute. "But that you will soon regret." With that, 2 living gods and a prince of Oblivion engaged in battle on the ruins of Mournhold. 17 Sun's Dusk, 2920. Tel Arin Morrowind. "Night Mother," said the guard. "Correspondence from your agent in the Imperial Palace." The Night Mother read the note carefully. The test had been a success. Miramor had been successfully detected and slain. The Emperor was in very unsafe hands. The Night Mother responded immediately. 18 of Sun's Dusk, 2920, Balmora Morrowind. Sothasil, face solemn and unreadable, greeted Vivek at the Grand Plaza in front of his palace. Vivek had ridden day and night after hearing about the battle in his tent in Bodrum. crossing mile after mile, cutting through the dangerous ground at Dalgoth-Ur at blinding speed. To the south, during all the course of the voyage, he could see the whirling red clouds and knew that the battle was continuing day after day. In Nissus, he met a messenger from Sothasil asking him to meet at Balmoral. "Where is Almalexia?" "Inside," says Sothasil wearily. There was a long, ugly gash running across his jaw. She's gravely injured, but Mehrunes Dagon will not return from oblivion for many a moon. Almalexia lay on a bed of silk tended to by Vivek's own healers. Her face, even her lips, was grey as stone and blood-stained through the gauze of her bandages. Vivek took her cold hand. Almalexia's mouth moved wordlessly. She was dreaming. She was battling Mehrunes Dagon again amid a firestorm. All around her, the blackened husk of a castle crumbled, splashing sparks into the night sky. The Daedra's claws dug into her belly, spreading poison through her veins, while Almalexia throttled him. As she sank to the ground beside her defeated foe, she saw that the castle consumed by fire was not Castle Mournfold. It was the Imperial Palace. This is 2920 Sun's Dusk, Volume 11. 24th of Sun's Dusk, 2920, the Imperial City, Cyrodiil. A winter gale blew over the city, splashing the windows and glass domes of the Imperial Palace. Quivering light rays illuminated the figures within the surreal patterns. The Emperor barked orders to his staff in preparations for the banquet and ball. This was what he enjoyed best more than battle. King Drozel was supervising the entertainment, having strong opinions on the matter. The Emperor himself was arranging the details of the dinner. Roast nebfish, vegetable marrow, cream soups, buttered hellerak, cod scrum, tongue in aspic. Potentate Versidusci had made a few suggestions of his own, but the tastes of the Akaviri were very peculiar. The Lady Corda accompanied the Emperor to his chambers as night fell. The year is concluded in the Evening Star. That was 2920, Sun's Dusk, Volume 11. We conclude 2920 with 2920 Evening Star, Volume 12. Evening Star, Book 12 of 2920, The Last Year of the First Era, by Karlovac Townway. First of Sun's Dusk, 2920, Balmora Morrowind. The winter morning sun glinted through the cobweb of frost on the window, and Almalexia opened her eyes. An ancient healer mopped a wet cloth across her head, smiling with relief. Asleep in the chair next to her bed was Vivek. The healer rushed to his side cabinet and returned with a flagon of water. "How are you feeling, goddess?" asked the healer. "Like I've been asleep for a very long time," said Almalexia. "So you have 15 days," said the healer, and touched Vivek's arm. "Master, wake up," she speaks. Vivek rose with a start, and seeing Almalexia alive and awake, his face broke into a wide grin. He kissed her forehead and took her hand. At last there was warmth again in her flesh. Almalexia's peaceful repose suddenly snapped. "Sothasil." "He's alive and well," replied Vivek, working on one of his machines again somewhere. He would have stayed here too, but he realized he could do you more good working that particular sorcery of his. The Castellan appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt you, Master, but I wanted to tell you that your fastest messenger left late last night for the Imperial City." "Messenger?" asked Almalexia. "Vivek, what has happened?" "I was to go and sign a truce with the Emperor on the 6th, so I sent him word that it had to be postponed." "You can't do me any good here," said Almalexia, pulling herself up with effort. "But if you don't sign that truce, you'll put Morrowind back to war, maybe for another 80 years. If you leave today with an escort and hurry, perhaps you can get to the Imperial City only a day or two late." "Are you certain you don't need me here?" asked Vivek. "I know that Morrowind needs you more." 6th of Sun's Dusk, 2920. The Imperial City, Cyrodiil. The Emperor Raymond III sat on his throne, surveying the audience chamber. It was a spectacular sight. Silver ribbons dangled from the rafters. Burning cauldrons of sweet herbs simmered in every corner, the Andonian swallowtails sweeping through the air, singing their songs. When the torches were lit and servants began fanning, the room would be transfigured into a shimmering fantasy land. He could smell the kitchen already, spices and roasts. The potentate Versidusci and his son Severian Sharak slithered into the room, both bedecked in the headdress and jewelry of the Tsaisky. There was no smile on their golden face, but there seldom was one. The Emperor still greeted his trusted advisor with enthusiasm. This ought to impress those savage dark elves, he laughed. When are they supposed to arrive? A messenger has just arrived from Vivek, said the potentate solemnly. I think it would be best if your Imperial Majesty met him alone. The Emperor lost his laughter, but nodded to his servants to withdraw. The door then opened, and the Lady Corda walked into the room with a parchment in her hand. She shut the door behind her, but did not look up to meet the Emperor's face. The messenger gave his letter to my mistress, said Riemann, incredulous, rising to take the note. That's a highly unorthodox way of delivering a message. But the message itself was very unorthodox, said Corda, looking up into his one good eye. With a single blinding motion, she brought the letter up under the Emperor's chin. His eyes widened and blood poured down the blank parchment. Blank, that is, except for a small black mark. The sign of the Marag Tong. It fell to the floor, revealing the hidden dagger hidden behind it, which he now twisted, severing his throat to the bone. The Emperor collapsed to the floor, gasping soundlessly. How long do you need? Asked the Severan Churak. 5 minutes, said Corda, wiping the blood from her hands. If you can give me 10, though, I'll be doubly grateful. Very well, said the potentate to Corda's back as she raced from the audience chamber. She ought to have been an Akaviri. The way the girl handles a blade is truly remarkable. I must go and establish our alibi, said Severan Churak, disappearing behind one of the secret passages that only the Emperor's most trusted knew about. Do you remember, close to a year ago, your Imperial Majesty? The potentate smiled, looking down at the dying man. When you told me to remember, you, Akaviri, have a lot of showy moves. But if just one of our strikes comes through, it's all over for you. I remembered that, you see. The Emperor spat up blood and somehow said the word. Snake. I am a snake, your Imperial Majesty, inside and out. But I didn't lie. There was a messenger from Vivek. Seems he'll be a little late in arriving, the potentate shrugged before disappearing behind the secret passage. Don't worry yourself. I'm sure the food won't go bad. The Emperor of Tamriel died in a pool of his own blood in his empty audience chamber, decorated for a grand ball. He was found by his bodyguard 15 minutes later. Corda was nowhere to be found. 8th of Sun's Dusk, 2920. Carasuvio, Cyrodiil. Lord Glavius, apologizing profusely for the quality of the road through the forest, was the first emissary to greet Vivek and his escort as they arrived. A string of burning globes decorated the leafless trees surrounding the villa, bobbing in the gentle but frigid night breeze. From within, Vivek could smell the simple feast and a high, sad melody. It was a traditional Akaviri wintertide carol. Residu Shai greeted Vivek at the front door. I'm glad you received the message before you got all the way to the city, said the potentate, guiding his guest into the large, warm drawing room. We are in a difficult transition time, and for the moment it is best not to conduct our business at the capital. There is no heir? Asked Vivek. No official one, though there are distant cousins vying for the throne. While we sort the matter out, at least temporarily, the nobles have decided that I may act in the office of my late master. Residu Shai signaled for the servants to draw 2 comfortable chairs in front of the fireplace. Would you feel most comfortable if we signed the treaty officially right now, or do you like to eat something first? You intend to honor the Emperor's treaty. I intend to do everything as the Emperor, said the potentate. 14th of Sun's Dusk, 2920, Tel Arin Morrowind. Corda, dusty from the road, flew into the Night Mother's arms. For a moment they stayed locked together, the Night Mother stroking her daughter's hair, kissing her forehead. Finally, she reached into her sleeve and handed Corda a letter. What is it? Asked Corda. A letter from the potentate, expressing his delight at your expertise, replied the Night Mother. He's promised to send us payment, but I've already sent him back a reply. The late Empress paid us enough for her husband's death. The fellow would not have us be greedy beyond our needs. You should not be paid twice for the same murder, so it is written. He killed Rija, my sister, said Corda quietly. And so it should be that you struck the blow. Where will I go now? Whenever any of our holy workers becomes too famous to continue the crusade, we send them to an island called Venura. It's not more than a month's voyage by boat, and I've arranged for a delightful estate for your sanctuary. The Night Mother kissed the girl's tears. You meet many friends there, and I know you will find peace and happiness at last, my child. 19th of Sun's Dusk, 2920, Mournhold Morrowind. Amalexia surveyed the rebuilding of the town. The spirit of the citizens was truly inspirational, she thought, as she walked among the skeletons of new buildings standing in the blackened, shattered remains of the old. Even the plant life showed a remarkable resilience. There was a life yet in the blasted remains of the cumberry and rue-brush shrubs that once lined the main avenue. She could feel the pulse come springtide greenwood bolt through the black. The Duke's heirs, a lad of considerable intelligence and sturdy Denmark courage, was coming down from the north to take his father's place. The land would do more than survive. It would strengthen and expand. She felt the future much more strongly than she saw the present. Of all the things she was most certain of, she knew that Mordhold was forever home to at least one goddess. 22nd of Sun's Dusk, 2920, the Imperial City, Cyrodiil. The Cyrodiil line is dead, announced the potentate to the crowd gathered beneath the speaker's balcony of the Imperial Palace. But the Empire lives. The distant relatives of our beloved Emperor have been judged unworthy of the throne by the trusted nobility who advised His Imperial Majesty throughout his long and industrious reign. It has been decided that as an impartial and faithful friend of Rune III, I will have the responsibility of continuing on in his name. The Akaviri paused, allowing his words to echo and translate into the ears of the populace. They merely stared at him, in silence. The rain had washed through the streets of the city, but the sun, for a brief time, appeared to be offering a respite from the winter storms. I want to make it clear that I am not taking the title Emperor, he continued. I have been and will continue to be Potentate for Siju Shai, an alien welcomed kindly to your shores. It will be my duty to protect my adopted homeland, and I pledge to work tirelessly at this task until someone more worthy takes the burden from me. As my first act, I declare that in commemoration of this historical moment, the beginning on the 1st of Morning Star, we will enter year 1 of the Second Era as time will be reckoned. Thus we mourn the loss of our imperial family and look forward to the future. Only one man clapped at these words. King Drozel of Senchal truly believed that this would be the finest thing to happen to Tamriel in history. Of course, he was quite mad. 31st of Sun's Dusk, 2920, Ebonheart Morrowind. In the smoky catacombs beneath the city where Sothasil forged the future with his arcane clockwork apparatus, something unforeseen happened. An oily bubble seeped from a long-trusted gear and popped. Immediately, the wizard's attention was drawn to it and to the chain that tiny action triggered. A pipe shifted half an inch to the left, a tread skipped, a coil rewound itself and began spinning in a counter direction. A piston that had been left thrusting left, right for millennia suddenly began shifting right-left. Nothing broke, but everything changed. It cannot be fixed now, said the sorcerer quietly. He looked up through a crick in the ceiling into the night sky. It was midnight. Second Era, the Age of Chaos, had begun. That was 2920 Evening Star, Volume 12, concluding the 2920 series.